Oh, caffeine headache. All right, here goes. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. El violador eras tú. El violador eras tú. Pamada.
Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. Y la culpa no era mía, ni dónde estaba, ni cómo vestía. El violador eras tú. El violador eres tú.
So there is this song out there, this revolutionary and revolutionizing song that Latin American feminists are singing. I'm pretty sure it started in Chile, in Santiago, where I have family. And, because of that, I was following some of the unrest recently, quite closely. And then basically, as soon as that calms down, you have, this feminist anthem rise up. Why? Because intersectionality, which I have talked about before. I don't think I'm going to approach it too much in this video, but that's what's going on. It started in Chile, as I said, I'm pretty sure, but it's all over Latin America now. Big performances, I guess we'll say, in Mexico City, in Brazil, in Peru. So, someone put this song together and a whole crowd of women will gather in a plaza or in some, big public space, and they'll sing this thing. And I want to talk about the good and the bad of it. Now, it's easy to make fun of militant Latin American feminists, especially for Americans, because Latin American feminists are the militant ones, are very much in the same line as the European ones. So compared to militant American feminists are actually quite modest and meek. So with the Latin American and European strains, there's a whole lot more nudity, a whole lot more blood, a whole lot more desecration of holy objects. There's just a whole lot of everything. They are a lot. They are much. So it's easy to make fun of them, but I do want to sort of, it's a fascinating song for several reasons, and so I thought the way I would approach it would be through the lens of what's good and what's bad, because actually, there's something, with all the mockery that's happening over this song online, there actually is something fundamentally true in the song that needs to be dealt with. And if you are sympathetic to the song, it's probably not what you think. The thing that's fundamentally true is not what you think. So let's get to that. Let's get to what is good about this song. So, and the fault wasn't mine. It wasn't my fault. Neither with where I was or how I was dressed. You are the rapist. You were the violator. I've heard eras, I've heard eres. So it just depends. Sometimes it's past, sometimes it's present. But you are the rapist. All right, so what I want to talk about right now on the good side of things is the fault was not mine. Neither how I was dressed nor where I was. Okay. So, in my opinion, a cultural obstacle that Latin Americans face is their view of personal and corporate responsibility. Now, what I'm about to describe is a human phenomenon. As with most human phenomena, when one way of thinking starts to dominate over another, when you're talking about a whole society, it creates trends and tendencies. Okay? So, a way in which Latin culture is often very different from Anglo culture, is in how they think about theft, right? So, if you leave your bike out on the stoop and someone steals it, a Latin American will be much more likely to be angry at you, the victim. And an Anglo will be much more likely to be angry at the thief. Now, both will say you were stupid for leaving it out on the stoop, but the sense of a moral failing, thieves are going to thieve. Right? The moral failure was with the person who was descuidado, with the person who didn't take care. That's where the moral failing is. And I would even go so far as to say that there's a little streak in Latin culture of, if you don't take advantage of an opportunity that, someone who's careless presents you, you're letting down yourself and your family. If you can, and which is why that feeds all into corruption. I could do many videos about this topic, but it's terrible to blame the victim. And I think there's a little something in Latin American culture that blames the victim. So a lot of the mocking responses toward this feminist song, which is not presenting any new ideas, have been mocking the idea it wasn't my fault, regardless of how I was dressed or where I was. Now, you can say it's stupid, and even morally stupid, to dress certain ways and be in certain places. But a victim is always a victim, and the violator is always the violator. Did you know that you shouldn't rape prostitutes? Yeah, that's a fact. There's no such thing. There is no one in the world who is more wrongly dressed and more in the wrong place than a prostitute. And yet, one should not rape prostitutes. That's just reality. So, to me, it's a good thing that people talk against the idea of responsibility and get people to not blame the victim, even when victims are complicit, because they often are. Right? And I'm not talking about rape now exclusively. But yeah, things are complicated and human always, and victims are complicit, and yet they are never to blame. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the song does, and I think that's something that needs to be talked about more, generally, by all of us, and in Latin American culture. Now, the bad thing about this song, hey, it's intersectionality rearing its ugly head again. Just as these women are singing that they should not be blamed, the victims of sexual assault should not be blamed for where they are, where they were, and how they dressed for that happening to them. They're doing the same thing to other people. You are the rapist. Now, there are two ways to look at how that line is delivered. One is to see the song from one individual to another, from the victim to the violator, right? But that's not how it plays. And this piece is enough of a work of rhetorical genius. People are aware that what they're doing is what has been happening in feminist and post-feminist rhetoric for a long time, which is that people who don't think like them are to blame, right? The patriarchy is to blame. Men are to blame, right? How many of us have been exposed to rhetoric about how all men are violent, how all men are rapists? So there's something very, very sinister when there's a whole crowd of 1,000 women and they all point in the same direction and say, you are the rapist. That you is you, buddy. That you is me. It's supposed to be men. And just as I just threw out the idea, hey, you don't rape prostitutes, like, people who might have a tendency to blame the victim, of course they're going to agree with that. Of course you don't rape prostitutes, right? There will be a lot of women in that crowd pointing at me and saying, you are a rapist, who would then say, well, it's, you are not a rapist, but men, right? And we have to realize it's not even like a step. You can't talk about classes and then exclude an individual when you're talking in such definitive terms, right? Oh, so you like me, so I'm not a rapist, but men are rapists, right? Can't do that. So, the reason I mentioned intersectionality a couple of times, there's this idea of creating this web of responsibility when it comes to the perpetrator, and a web of victimhood that gets applied to victims. And that's why you see these classes, right, of, if you can combine the classes of a victim, then you have more power in this way of thinking, right? In this flipping of the power dynamics, right? People are obsessed with power dynamics. No one thinks about sacrificing and giving oneself up for the other anymore. It's all about power. And if men are going to have all the power and we can't wrest it from them, then we need to flip the script. We need to flip the script and take power. And that's why you get these complexes of victimhood, right? Like you have various statuses. So a certain kind of person is a victim and another kind of person is a victim. If you put those two together, then you have a super victim, and that person has more power. And don't think that this is the Christian view of the first shall be last, or that the greater serve the lesser, that the strong serve the weak. It's not that. It's not about service. It's about taking power. And so what we have is a class of people, a certain sort of person, militant feminists, trying to bring men low by accusing us of being rapists. Yeah, it's a pretty big deal. So yeah, maybe the good part was just my little tricky little sweet to trick you into watching the end of this video. Because this song is bad, people. Yeah. I guess I said my piece. Yeah. So, you know what? I hope the comments have been flying. If you haven't commented yet, comment now. Comment on on all the generalizations I made about Latin Americans and about Latin American culture. Hit me with that and hit me hard. Comment on the good part of that song and the bits that I talked about there. And comment on whether there's any legitimacy to this accusation. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they weren't talking to all of us. But I don't think so. Anyway, drop a comment. Let me know. Don't forget to like, subscribe. The peace of Christ be upon you.